Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan Sowery from Ohio EPA, and we'll be starting our webinar in approximately 1 minute to give people a chance to log on. While we are waiting for our last minute folks to join us, I have a question for you that's seasonally appropriate. So in your chat, if you would, let me know if you prefer pumpkin spice Costa Latte or apple cider this time of year. Rudy, good answer. There are no wrong answers here. Again, for anybody logging on, Stephen, good answer. Jamie, I love it. Jacqueline, yep, that's a good one. Kelly, good one. There are no wrong answers here, but again, for those of you logging on just now, I was just asking the audience while we're waiting to get started, do you prefer pumpkin spiced latte? And I oftentimes refer to them as Costa lattes, or apple cider. Boy, a lot of people like apple cider. What's up with that? Yeah, Jessica, that's the right answer. Apple cider all the way. Definitely costs less probably than a Costa latte. All right, it is on the dot, 1 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference. My name is Dan Sowery with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA. I will be moderating this afternoon's Break It Down session. Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference has held 10 sessions over the past 3 days. And if you haven't already registered for our last session for this year's conference titled Farming for a Sustainable Future, it's never too late to sign up. Also keep in mind that all the sessions are being recorded for you to view later. We will also be taking all of these recordings and putting these on our agency YouTube channel as well. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to help you participate in this session. On the slide here, you'll see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something like this. It looks on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this presentation, you are listening in using your computer audio. If you're having sound issues or if the slides stop advancing, please try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. If you continue to have issues, please let us know in the Q&A pane, and one of our behind-the-scenes team's members will try to assist you. Please feel free to submit questions to the presenters by clicking on the question mark icon, which several of you have already learned how to do, and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. You may also send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will try our best to answer questions as they come in and during the Q&A portion. If we don't answer your question during the Q&A, we will provide your questions to the presenters to follow up via email following today's session. You can click on the document icon on your attendee interface to view included handouts. One of those handouts includes a PDF file of the PowerPoint slides used for today's presentation. Again, this session is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording and a follow-up email along with the survey. The survey will also appear once this session ends. We value your feedback and would greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's anything else that we can do to further assist you. And with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters. First, we'll hear from Lindsay Acker. Lindsay currently serves as the Event Coordination Specialist with the City of Columbus Recreation and Parks Department Office of Special Events. With over 10 years of experience as an event producer, Lindsay has produced events for the private and public sectors throughout Ohio and across the United States. Later during this webinar, we'll hear from Amanda Bennett. Amanda joined the Office of Farmland Preservation at the Ohio Department of Agriculture in June of 2010. As program manager, she is responsible for coordinating both the landowner application process for the Clean Ohio Local Agricultural Easement Purchase Program, that's a mouthful, and the closing of easements selected for the program. So with that, I will now turn it over to our first presenter, Lindsay Acker.
Hello, everyone. As Dan mentioned, my name is Lindsay Acker, and I work with City of Columbus Recreation and Parks Department. I have been with Rec and Parks since 2019, and I'm with the Office of Special Events. And in the Office of Special Events, we produce about 30 events per year. Our largest of our events is Jazz and Rib Fest. And for Jazz and Rib Fest and most of our other events, I'm the vendor coordinator for those events, as well as helping with event operations. Jazz and Rib Fest has an over 40-year history as a signature event in downtown Columbus. It is a 3-day festival with over 200 attendees each year. We have over 50 food and beverage vendors on site at the event. We also have 3 performance stages featuring over 40 acts. We have local and national acts coming to the event. In this photo here, you can see Stephanie Mills performing to a packed crowd. That was this past summer. So we have lots of different things happening at this festival. So to dive into our sustainability program here, back in 2019, we had a waste assessment done for the festival by GT Environmental. They performed the assessment for both Jazz and Rib Fest and for SWACO, the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. And in that assessment, they found that over 22 tons of trash were generated over just 3 days at the festival. And that 45% of the trash could be diverted through recycling and composting. And 91% of the participants that were surveyed said that they would like to see recycling at the festival. So fast forward 2 years, the festival did not happen in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. When we came back in 2022, we wanted to take some of the findings from the 2019 assessment and put a sustainability plan into action. So our plan included offering festival-wide recycling, pre-consumer composting, so that means food scraps from all of the food vendors, recycling and compost collections directly from the vendor booths as well as our sponsor booths. So that was about 70 booth spaces. We chose to use lightweight aluminum beer cups instead of plastic. With that, aluminum tends to be a little more environmentally friendly since aluminum can actually be recycled an infinite number of times without degrading, unlike plastic, which can only be recycled a handful of times, and that before it breaks down and becomes unusable, and microplastics and things like that. And up until recently, you couldn't recycle single-use plastic cups in Columbus. So as of now, you can, which is great news, but at the time when we were coming up with this plan, that wasn't an option. All of the beverages sold at the festival came in recyclable containers. We partnered with Jackie O's Brewery as our 3-year beverage partner. So that contract started in 2022 and will continue through 2024. Jackie O's they brew all of their beer sustainably, so they use renewable resources to produce the beer and biodegradable packaging when they can. We also booked more local and Ohio-based food vendors. Up until 2022, we had been working with an outside concessionaire to help book some of our festival food vendors. So that would be like our elephant ears and ice cream and things like that. And a lot of them were coming from out of state. We chose to bring that booking process in-house. So with that, we have a lot more local vendors, a lot of local food trucks. So we have a variety of food in addition to the barbecue there, which obviously barbecue is our #1 thing, but we have a lot of different things for people to try and enjoy, and happy to have so many local places involved. We replaced 10,000 printed paper programs with our mobile app. That was yearly, so saved a lot of paper by doing that. Also, new for 2023, we started recycling the used cooking oil and grease and to turn that into biodiesel. And then we also took the ash and charcoal from all the barbecue grills and used that as compost on a local farm. And excuse me. So what it takes to get to our sustainability program is we applied for an Ohio EPA recycle and litter prevention grant. That really helped kind of jumpstart this program. We were a recipient of the grant, and that helped cover a lot of the aspects of our program through the grant funding. So thank you to the EPA for that. We're really grateful for that opportunity. So what we did with the grant funding and our funding as well is we enlisted the help of Zero Waste Event Productions. They're a leader in zero waste events in the region, I would say. So they do a great job. They came out and they set up an on-site recycling sorting center, excuse me. You can see that in the picture here. They had a conveyor belt set up and they were hand sorting all of the recycling. We paired the recycling bins with the trash containers throughout the festival grounds. We had a dedicated vendor compost and recycling collection team. So they were going to each of the 70 booths and collecting compost and recycling throughout the event. We had a dedicated trash and litter collection team. So that was a separate team entirely, but we all worked together to make sure the site was clean every single day. And we educated the public through signage and marketing. And here's some examples of some of the signage. This top sign, this is a beverage sign that's actually 20 feet long when you see it in real life, or 20 feet wide, I should say. This was above all of our beverage booths. We had 6 different beverage booths. And you can see there on the ends, it might be hard to see on your computer, but on the ends, you can see the little pictures of the aluminum cups. And we noted that all beverage containers sold here are recyclable, and we had recycling symbols on the sign and then as well as printed directly on the cup. And you can see the image at the bottom left, that graphic we used on social media and on our website. The image to the bottom right where it says recycling at the top, that was used this past year as signage on most of our recycling containers throughout the festival grounds. And that just really helped to clearly identify what items are recyclable and what was trash only, and very specific to our event. As you can see, the rib bones, so making sure people know that is trash only, please do not put that in recycling. Knowing that people may or may not listen or may not read, this is why we had a team on site to hand sort everything, and that really helped make a big difference in the way we were able to make this happen. So here's some images. You can see the compost collection on the top left, going around to the different vendor booths. We had a lot of roasted corn, so a lot of corn husks. In the middle picture here, you can see one of our stations with recycling and recycling and trash, and a large recycling banner. So there you can see one of the signs that was in place to help people know how to recycle right. And then to the right, this is one of my favorite pictures, is a picture of a dumpster, but it is a very clean dumpster. That is, like I said, hand sorted to make sure that it was not contaminated with any trash or anything else. With that, if you send a dumpster to the recycling facility and there's too much contamination from trash, it can be turned away at the recycling center and sent to the landfill instead. So all of our hard effort would have been in vain. So to see that perfect dumpster makes me very happy. And then here you can see some images of the crowd. So we, like I said, bring in about 200,000 people over the weekend. It can be somewhat difficult to service the trash and recycling within a crowd that big. This year, we refined our process to have small bins that were easier to service within the larger crowds, and they were being serviced regularly. Previously, we had some larger bins, and it was really hard to take care of it, and they tended to overflow. So this year, it seemed to work out a little bit better, just working with what we think, is called for that size of a crowd. Just kind of helped us to change our plan. And then the bottom left picture here, you can see a barrel that says ash only. That was one of the barrels that we had in place for all the food vendors. We had ash only and grease only barrels so that they could very easily dispose of their ash and charcoal or grease and oil so that those could be recycled and composted post-event. In the photo on the bottom right, you can see our hardworking zero waste team hand sorting late into the night. And they really just did a great job taking care of all that throughout the weekend. And then another thing Zero Waste provided was a final report after the event where they showed all of the statistics on how much we ended up diverting from the landfill. So in 2022, the results were we had diverted over 6,000 pounds of material. So that was about 4,000 pounds of recycling, about 1,900 pounds of compost. So with that, you can see some statistics here on what the equivalents to, what that equates to basically as far as reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, as we know, is a potent greenhouse gas and is one of the top contributors to global warming and climate change. So definitely good to be reducing that. So that was the ultimate goal of this. So you can see some of the equivalents down below. So it was the equivalent of by saving about 4,000 pounds from the 4,000 pounds of recycling from entering the landfill. It's essentially equivalent to 167 trees grown over 10 years. That is the amount of carbon they would have sequestered. So I just thought that was an interesting fun fact. You can take a look at the other ones below. And the compost, that was by reducing it by by about 2,000 pounds, that sequestered about the same amount of carbon as 38 trees grown over 10 years. It reduced the square volume, the volume from the landfill of about 50 square yards versus of recycling and about 2 square yards of compost. 2023, we were able to divert about 15,000 pounds of material. A lot of that was, still recycling and compost. I will say a big part of our recycling is there was a ton of cardboard from all the vendors. You wouldn't really think about that there would be so much cardboard at an event, but with the food vendors and the sponsors handing out giveaways, that was the majority of what we recycled and saved from the landfill. So with that, in addition to the just regular recycling and composting, we were also able to save about 7,000 pounds of grease and oil from the food vendors that was then converted into biodiesel, and also about 1,100 pounds, of ash and charcoal that was then used to compost on a local farm. So you can see some of the equivalents here, again, similar to 2022. I will say that this chart does not include the ash and charcoal and the grease and oil in the totals, so that they're kind of similar to 2022, but they are definitely they have increased a bit. And then in total, we were able to divert 21,000 pounds of material that was generated over 2 3-day events. So we're really happy about that and hope to continue to build on that. And yeah, I'm happy I was able to come and speak to everyone about this. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is, in addition to working with Zero Waste Event Productions, we also worked with a company called Green Mountain Products. They're out of Columbus. They were the company that recycled and composted the grease and oil and ash and charcoal. They did a fantastic job. They set out the barrels throughout the festival grounds and came and cleaned them up and made sure that they did, you know, a wonderful job just cleaning up after themselves. And it was really great. Zero Waste is out of Athens, Ohio, but as I mentioned, they work regionally, so I've definitely seen them in Columbus and throughout Ohio quite a bit. So just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you to the attendees and to the Ohio EPA, and also thank Amanda Bennett for being on this discussion as well. I really appreciate being able to share this with you all.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was a great presentation. A reminder for everybody, please continue to send your questions in through the Q&A pane, and then we will try to answer as many of those questions either during the question portion of this session, or we'll follow up with you afterwards. So we'll now hand it over to our second presenter, Amanda Bennett. Amanda?
All right, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Lindsay. That was amazing. If anything, I want to share with the group that we're the new kids on the block on zero waste at ODA in this case, and I'm learning a lot about the success of what you guys are doing in Columbus at Jazz and Ribs. But first of all, again, my name's Amanda Bennett. I work in the Office of Farmland Preservation at the Ohio Department of Agriculture, but was thrilled to be a part of this green movement by being asked to be a part of Ohio Department of Agriculture's planning group for zero waste space. My understanding is that a lot of these talks began pre-COVID about implementing some sort of zero waste initiative at the Ohio State Fair, and then the pandemic happened, and so we just did get involved in this project, I believe in 2022 when the State Fair came back to an in-person event. So of course, like I said, we're happy to be a part of this green movement, but the green is the operative word here, and that we you know, in speaking to you today, I have just 2 years of experience with this at the State Fair, and we really had to learn from the ground up. So with that, let's see. All right, so we continue to call what we're doing at the State Fair a pilot program because we are cautiously scaling up as we learn more each year. We began this initiative in 2022 by, with our partners, zeroing in, if you'll allow that, zeroing in on the Taste of Ohio building at the State Fairgrounds. That is where the commodities, the agricultural commodities, and I'm not going to be able to remember them all off the top of my head, but the Beef Council, the Poultry Association, dairy, sheep, all of those commodities have, it's like a food court at the Taste of Ohio Cafe, and they all serve their products in this building. So we decided to start this out cautiously as a 3-day pilot program at the Taste of Ohio Cafe. And with that, we did that at the last 3 days of the State Fair. We partnered with SWACO We applied and received money through the EPA's grant, which was in both years just invaluable, as well as Kroger and the Ohio Corn and Wheat Association. We worked with all of them, and with that, between in-kind and the grant funding, we had $26,000 to support this program. The funding was provided us the opportunity to hire experts that knew a lot more about this than us, and to create promotional and educational literature and signage. In 2022, we contracted with Goodland Sustainability Consultants out of Ohio to be our project manager and assist us with planning and implementation and reporting back to us. The commodities here that I mentioned played a large role in our pilot program because Goodland worked with them to purchase corn-based, remember, Ohio Corn and Wheat Association, corn-based compostables for the Taste of Ohio building for this pilot. And so each commodity during those 3 days served its food with compostable utensils, bowls, plates, cups, forks, napkins, and those commodities were reimbursed for those purchases for switching in the last 3 days of the fair from whatever they were using to these compostable materials. And so implementation wise, Goodland did the on-site work for us there. They created these clear signage at the waste stations in the building for the trash, compost, and recycling. They had staff that manned each station to help educate people in, eating their meals at the Taste of Ohio Cafe, and wore the branded Zero Waste logo shirts so that they could be easily identified. And then all the materials, and I'll talk about results at the end, but all materials were sent to Andre Farms for composting. When the Zero Waste Space pilot project ended that year, we worked with Ohio Corn and Wheat and Goodland to do an educational video to show what happens after it's all sorted. Where does it all go? And so you'll see here in this video that it's about to play what the waste turned into over time. And we're just going to do that video here. I apologize. There we go.
Andre Farms is a crop production corn and soybean facility. So about 25 years ago, we thought we could start finding organic matter somewhere to improve our soil tilth. And so that's the Andre Farm part, and that's where the composting has started up. Cool. Composting is the decomposition of carbon. Here at the facility here, we take food waste as carbon, just like the stuff you scrape off your plate at home and want to compost in the backyard. And then we add carbon to that, leaves, grass, horse manure, anything that's a dry carbon, wood chips, and we blend the two together and we get a great humus product at the other end. We have about 8 to 9 acres here of composting. Part of it's this bulking storage, and then about 6 acres where that composting is actually going on. We bring it here, we put it on the concrete pad, we mix it all together, and then about every 2 weeks we rotate it and mix it together again, and that helps in the breaking up of the process. We received some compostable items from the Ohio State Fair with food waste and things in them this year. That product was brought here to the pad, was worked in with additional organic matter. It's been rotated about every 2 weeks since fair time. Here just a week ago, we screened it through a 2-inch screen, so we took out anything that somebody may have put in that was bigger than that and we didn't want on the field. This fall, we're applying it on the fields where we'll be going to corn. We put compost on the acres that we're going to field in the fall. This is 1-year-old compost, and this is what we use on gardens and what we use on athletic fields or on yards, and using it on the farms also. As society wants to be more green, we need to be able to do more of these things.
Okay, I hope you were all able to see that. If not, you can use the chat to get with the organizers here, and we'll make sure that that can get distributed. Let's see. Okay, so I hope you're all still able to hear me. I'm going to continue on. So that was year one of the pilot program. That was 2022, and I failed to mention before the video that Andre Farms is in Northwest Ohio. And that is where the compost went from the 2022 pilot, the 3-day pilot. So we get to 2023, and with the report that we had from the previous year, and with the same partners on board for the most part, we said, okay, what can we do different for 2023? We learned a lot that first year, and one of the things that was mentioned, especially from our commodity partners at the Taste of Ohio Cafe, was that it was really difficult for them to do that switch from their products at the end of the state fair. And so we said, okay, let's put it at the beginning, and let's double it. So this time we went in, hit the ground running with a 6-day, the first half of the state fair. And again, it's still a pilot, so it's just in the Taste of Ohio Cafe with our commodities, but same partners, again, invaluable help. I can't mention enough of the Ohio EPA, not only to guide us with their expertise, but we applied for grant funding again with them and Kroger and Ohio Corn and Wheat. And this time we were going in with $72,000 to support this, this effort. Like Lindsay mentioned in her presentation, working with Zero Waste Event Productions, we worked with them in 2023. They became our project manager. And so working with them, we were going to do a lot of the same thing, even though it's not at the end now, it's at the beginning. The commodities we're going to order their compostables and use it for the first half of the fair. And then that project manager, of course, being Zero Waste Event Productions, was going to be on site again, just as the previous year with Goodland. Let's see here. I'm going to try to. I am having difficulty advancing my. There we go. Okay, scratch that. Okay, so implementation. Here we go. These pictures here are from that. They, again, in this case, Zero Waste Productions helped us with that signage component and with the waste bins, again, clearly labeled for patrons. They were on site every day of those 6 days, you know, helping fairgoers, educating fairgoers about the different bins and sorting through you know, what ends up in those bins outside the Taste of Ohio Cafe. This year they had like a tent where they had their conveyor belt that they were doing the sorting right there on site, which added like an extra educational piece for fairgoers. Let's see here, the recycling in this case for that year was hauled to Rumpke. And the compostable materials were sent to Athens Hawking Organics. Also in this slide, though, on the left-hand side, you should see our director, Ohio Department of Agriculture Director Brian Baldridge, standing next to one of our new banners that we created for this year's Zero Waste Space. And those were placed throughout the cafe to help educate fairgoers. And then the lower right photo, you'll see some corn in a raised bed. The corn, of course, Ohio Corn and Wheat was proud to have that there in a raised bed built by staff here at ODA. And what's in there is corn in the composted soil from the previous year at Andre Farms. And so that was just an additional extra, feather in our cap that we could, show the connection from start to finish for fair goers. So results. Both Goodland and Zero Waste provided ODA with final reports outlining the successes and, of course, the improvements that we can continue to work on in future years. In Goodland's final report, that was 2022, the 3-day pilot, if you'll recall, diverted more than 1,000 pounds of waste from landfills. 834 pounds of compostable materials were collected and 212 pounds of recyclable materials were collected. In 2023, Zero Waste event productions, look at us, we're right on par with doubling. More than 3,000 pounds of waste was diverted from landfills, nearly 2,200 pounds of compost, 850 pounds of waste was recycled. We attribute that to doubling the time period and our partners. So I want to thank you all. I think that is the end of my piece. So back to you, Dan.
All right, thank you, Lindsay and Amanda, for your excellent presentations. We're now going to have our presenters answer some of the questions submitted during today's presentation. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane. We'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. And if we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we will provide your questions to Amanda and Lindsay to follow up with via email after today's session. All right, first question, Amanda, since we were just talking or hearing from you, here's a question that we received from the audience just a second ago. How does Ohio Department of Agriculture avoid contamination in your compost?
That is a good question, my friends. I was only able to be out on site for one day this past, there was a team of us. I don't mean to make it sound like we weren't there as a department, but the contamination I couldn't speak to. I'd have to reach out to our partners at Zero Waste Productions about the actual on the ground sorting of the compost. But we did have the 3 bins in the Taste of Ohio Cafe, and as mentioned and shown in that picture, everything was hand sorted. So to that point, I could certainly get more information if anybody needs it.
All right. Switching gears, Lindsay, let's go to you for a question specifically about the Jazz and Rib Fest. So for that Jazz and Rib Festival, did you use volunteers or staff for litter collection and sorting? And if it was volunteers, how did you train them?
Good question. So in our case, we chose to use all paid staff. As we mentioned, or as I mentioned, we worked with Zero Waste, so we brought in their team to do the on-site collection and sorting. We also worked with another agency or another company, C&T Maintenance, to do all the trash collection and litter sweeping. But that isn't to say you can't use volunteers for this. Actually, one of the recommendations from Zero Waste was to really help with compliance, was to actually post volunteers at every single trash and recycling bin and make sure people knew what to recycle, knew how to recycle right. That wasn't something we had the ability to do, but that is certainly something to explore. And as I mentioned, if you wanted to work with volunteers to help with sorting and collection, I'm sure there's a way to do that. And I think if you had a company helping to kind of manage the overall project, I would imagine there would be a way to incorporate volunteers regardless of who was managing that.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Here's another question, and this is for both you, Lindsay, and Amanda. What was the most surprising lesson learned from the first of these events? And Lindsay, maybe we go with you first.
You know, it was interesting to just, after not having the event for a couple years, this was actually my first time being involved. So there was a large learning curve in a lot of respects. A big one was just making sure everyone was on the same page, communicating. As I mentioned, we worked with multiple different entities with the trash collection versus recycling collection. So there was definitely some challenges and things to learn about there. But really just the number one thing was making sure as the event organizer to just make sure that everyone was on the same page, checking in with people. If it seems like people aren't communicating properly or there's some confusion, just clearing that up from the start. So that was definitely an important lesson I learned. Honestly, in both years we did it because we had different challenges, but that seemed to be the one where if you're working with multiple entities or say volunteers, just making sure you all have a good, solid game plan.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. And Amanda, same question for you. What was the most surprising lesson learned from the first of these events?
Oh my goodness, a lot. But what I will piggyback off of Lindsay is communication. All I can think of is the adage, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and literally in this case, we've got, the state fair is a huge event, right? And we're doing this one little piece, this one building to get our feet wet. But even in that, you've got multiple commodities that are doing their, understandably, they've got their own thing, their own way of doing things for the fair. Some of them contract people to actually man their booths. And so each day brought with it a different, group of parties involved in that and making it happen that day. And so one thing that came up, especially this year, and I believe the previous year, was the need for something, a check-in every morning to just kind of make sure everybody was on the same page about what was happening in the building. And with just so many people coming in and out, communication is understandably key.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Great answer from both of you. Lindsay, Lindsay and Amanda, I'm going to ask you both a similar question, but Lindsay, we'll start with you. How well did your organization market that the event was zero waste, and what methods did you use to market it?
Yeah, so in 2022, when we received the grant, we put out a press release talking all about the sustainability program at Jazz and Rip Fest, and that we were a recipient of the grant, as well as the partnerships with Jackie O's as a sustainable company, as our beer provider, as our official beverage partner, and our partnership with Zero Waste. So we pushed that out. We did some social posts. We had it on our website, in our beverages section, as well as on the mobile app. The website gets quite a bit of traffic, especially in the time leading up to the event. So we have some statistics on it here, but I think certainly that month we get about 5,000 page views on that specific page. So there was quite a bit of advanced marketing. I would say we could do more, but that was again in our pilot year and our second year really kind of feeling this out. That's what we had planned in advance. And then on site, we just had a lot of signage. So really knowing that people might see that in advance, but they may or may not remember once they're there, and it might be confusing. So really signage, again, communication is key with the public. So a lot of signage on site as well.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. And Amanda, same question for you. How well did your organization market that the event was zero waste? So I'm guessing we're talking about the Taste of Ohio. And what methods did you use to market it?
Good question. Because you're absolutely correct. We were one building inside the larger state fair. And to Lindsay's point on her event, we could always do more. I remember the walk from the parking lot to Taste of Ohio. There's plenty of opportunities there to say, hey, this is what we're doing here at the Taste of Ohio building. Come check it out. But we are lucky to have such a great communications division at the Ohio Department of Agriculture, and they were out there every day. I believe both years, but I definitely saw them here in 2023 shooting video, shooting, talking to fairgoers, talking to zero waste events each day, and putting things out on social media about, hey, check out what we're doing here. And then just like Lindsay said in her event, signage throughout the building. Even I believe in 2022, a table with some of those compostable materials for people that are walking by and being like, hey, look at this, you can have a plate made out of corn, check it out. So yeah, it's it was all around very much pushed in social media, but and at least I believe in our case there were press events, one or both years with the director on the ground.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And hey, I have a follow-up question for you while I still have you on the line. Do you think more volunteers are needed to make these events more successful?
That is a great question. I think that yes, volunteers are great. However, in our situation at the Taste of Ohio building, not a lot of room for a lot of volunteers to be running around amongst all the patrons. And so when I was out there on site, one of the 6 days this year, I saw two people, but they were doing everything, literally everything, running and emptying the bins and out back sorting and educating patrons. And so absolutely more volunteers would be great, but to the point of things we've talked about, communication would be key, and making sure everybody's on the same page with what their responsibilities are at the time. But it'll be interesting to see as we move forward, and if we're able to scale it up even more, I think it would be invaluable to have more volunteers.
All right, so thank you, Amanda. Lindsay, I'm curious what your answer is to this. Are more volunteers needed to make these events more successful?
I would say, if we had the opportunity to work with volunteers, I think that, as I had mentioned, if we were able to have volunteers help near the different collection areas, or the waste and recycling bins, if people had questions about if they can recycle something, I think that would definitely be helpful, or to help supplement with staff with collections and things like that. I will say generally we have moved away from working with volunteers. Mostly that was related to beverage sales, but I would be definitely interested in exploring it related to compost, or excuse me, to the recycling and to the recycling collection, if it made sense. So yeah, I think that definitely could help.
Excellent. And Lindsay, while I have you on here, this question I'm going to ask for both of you, but Lindsay, you first. Who came up with the idea to make your event zero waste? Was it an employee? Was it an attendee recommendation, the mayor, or who was it?
I would say kind of a combination of all of the above. So as I mentioned, I joined the team in 2019. In fall of 2019, that waste assessment was done by GT Environmental in July of 2019. So clearly there was already some thought behind making the event more sustainable. So that was already put in place before I started. I don't know exactly how that came to be, but I know that there's a lot of initiatives in place for the city of Columbus specifically to make the city more sustainable. So honestly, and then as far as actually starting this specific program, between having the waste assessment done and speaking to my supervisor, our festival director, about it, we had talked about, well, looking to see what grants are out there, and spoke to SWACO, and they actually recommended the Ohio EPA grant. And like I said, that really helped motivate, I don't want to say motivate us, but encourage us to move forward with the project, since it is a larger, it is not inexpensive to do something at that scale. It's something that can be worked into the budget, but with it being the first year we had done it, we just didn't even know what to expect. So really it was a combination of, generally where the city stands on this, and then down to the people actually running the event. We really wanted to push for it, so we just went for it.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. And Amanda, same question for you. Who came up with the idea to make your event zero waste? Again, was it an employee, an attendee recommendation, the mayor? And Amanda, I think I know the answer to this because we were all involved together in that Taste of Ohio.
You may want to answer it, Dan. I came on board between the first conversations pre-pandemic. I didn't come on board until we were hitting the ground running to do the 3-day pilot. But my memory, and I hope I'm not speaking out of was that this came from the top, that the governor's office was interested in seeing a zero waste initiative instituted at the Ohio State Fair. And so we were all on board with making this realized for the state, frankly.
Yeah, and Amanda, that is the exact, my understanding as well. It came from the very top in the state of Ohio from the governor's office with this initiative. And this also matches with Governor DeWine's initiative to deal with litter across the entire state of Ohio. So thank you for that. All right, Lindsay, switching to you, I have a question. How much does it cost to have this type of sustainability program at the Jazz and Rib Festival?
Yeah, so for the program I just mentioned from this past year, it was about $36,000, and that includes, as I mentioned, all paid staff. So that was with Zero Waste, working with the company to provide with Central Ohio contractors. In this case, they provided the dumpsters and processing for the recycling, working with a print and graphics company to have the signage produced, and then another company as well, Green Mountain Productions, to have the cooking oil and compost and the ash composted. So that doesn't include golf carts, radios, things like that are just general event operations that then would have to be allocated to those teams. But with that, as I mentioned, again, with the grant, that did help cover some of that. But for our overall event budget, I mean, certainly that is a high price tag, but it is something that we felt was important for the event, with having that many people over that such a short amount of time. So yeah, so also I should mention that number doesn't include the aluminum cups that we had purchased the previous year. Those were a little bit pricier than plastic cups, but that was just for basically the services and disposal.
Yeah, and one of the great things about aluminum, as with most metals, is you can continue to recycle those indefinitely. And I think one of you had mentioned that that's not necessarily the case when it comes to plastic. So next question, and maybe we start with Amanda for this one. What do you recommend a festival attendee can do to influence that the event becomes zero waste in the future?
Good question. Well, I'll speak specifically to the state fair, right? Because even though we had this event piloted in one building, you all know that the state fair is much bigger than that. So I can speak to that, but as a festival goer myself, an event attender for that matter, attendee, I would this came to us, as we've mentioned, for ODA through the governor's office and through state government. And so Jazz and Ribs, and I'll let Lindsay speak to that, but elected officials, letting them know that you'd like to see these take place, maybe from the ground up in this case, to try and get something started locally.
Excellent. And Lindsay, I'm going to ask you the same question specific to attendees wanting to attend events like the Jazz and Rib Festival. What can they do to influence that the event that they're attending becomes zero waste in the future?
Since we are, I'm with the City of Columbus, so as city government, I would say it's exactly the same as what Amanda mentioned. Certainly reaching out, to City Council, the mayor, anything like that, to just let your voice be heard, that this is something that you really value and want to see. I think that definitely goes a long way. Certainly, you know, reaching out directly to the event, we're always open to feedback. But I would say coming from the top down, being a government entity, that seems to go a long way for sure.
Excellent. All right, a very popular question. We have seen this come through in the Q&A pane a few different ways, but are there any funding opportunities for zero waste events? And Lindsay, since we were just with you, maybe you can help with that one.
Yeah, so I mean, through, as I mentioned many times, the Ohio EPA grant, I know that you guys are going to talk about that a little more in detail, but that is specifically for either government agencies or entities with government sponsors. So I am not exactly sure who all will qualify, but I know there's definitely opportunities there. I know SWACO has the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, if you're located in Central Ohio, has other grant opportunities. I'm sure there's more out there, but those are just the two that I'm aware of in our area of Ohio.
All right, and thank you, Lindsay. And Amanda, same question for you.
With funding opportunities, I again can't stress enough the Ohio EPA grant was pivotal for both years for us, and we were fortunate to be able to get, you know, to do our first year and get more for the second year. But also to that point, you know, think about other partners as well. We were fortunate to have commitment from Kroger. I cannot think of the name of the particular office or division at Kroger that you would go to, but they were enthusiastic about helping just as much as EPA was, and especially if we're talking about zero waste. You know, working with the solid waste districts and recycling companies and all of that. Some of that was donated in kind and was invaluable to us.
Excellent, thank you. And I see this just came in from one of our attendees as well, and I'm really curious about this one. So maybe Amanda, we were just with you, we'll stick with you. How did the public respond to the event? Were they interested in learning more? And I guess we're talking about, for you, Amanda, we're talking about at the Zero Waste event at the State Fair.
That is a great question. What we heard and what was reported back to us from Zero Waste Productions was that it's a mixed bag, right? That there were very enthusiastic patrons and customers at the Taste of Ohio building that were like, yes, awesome, thank you for having this, and interested in learning more. And then, you know, unfortunately, people that would just throw everything in one bin without regard for where it should go. And so it was received differently depending on who the person was eating at the Taste of Ohio cafe that day. But in general, all very good feedback. And hey, didn't know that was happening here. So you know, that kind of thing. That was great.
So Lindsay, same question for you. How did the public respond to the Jazz and Ribs Festival event, the Zero Waste there, and were they interested in learning more?
I would say the response was definitely really positive. I mean, as far as like public, any kind of response from the public directly, I didn't hear anything negative on social media or anything like that, which, you know, people will let you know how they feel on social media for sure. I didn't see anything negative there. I will say it was a little bit difficult with some of the food vendors to just make sure that they were aware of this service was being provided, and to make sure that like all their staff was being compliant as far as like stacking their boxes and having the compost ready, just because it was one extra thing to do, I guess. I don't know. And then, you know, also again, with the communication sort of breakdowns that we were working to remedy, just that was more kind of the feedback I received was more just operationally where people were having issues, but overall people were very happy that there was recycling and pre-consumer composting in the case of vendors. So I would say for sure the takeaway was overwhelmingly positive.
That's excellent feedback to hear. So at this point in time, we're We're 2 minutes to 2, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I wanted to thank again to our two presenters for your really interesting perspectives from a couple different types of zero waste events. And I also want to thank each of you today for joining us. This webinar has been recorded, and you will receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording and a link to the session survey. Before we end the session today, we would like to point your attention to Ohio EPA's Recycling and Litter Prevention Grants, and you heard our two presenters plug these grants a few times today. Ohio EPA's yearly recycling grant program supports communities, nonprofits, businesses, and schools to initiate or expand recycling programs, encourage sustainable practices, stimulate economic growth, and support litter prevention efforts through 5 different grants. Applications are online and open on October 2nd and close on December 1st. Again, please visit recycleohio.gov for more information. Before we end, please check out our last session for the 2023 Sustainability Conference at 2:30 today, titled Farming for a Sustainable Future. Also keep in mind that all these sessions have been recorded for you to view later. Once you leave, you will receive a survey, and we value your feedback, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you'd let us know how we're doing, and let us know if there's anything that we can do to further assist you. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with links to view a recording of today's session, a certificate of attendance, and another link to the survey if you don't get a chance to complete it now. And with that, we will end this session of Ohio EPA's 2023 Sustainability Conference. We hope you can join us for our last conference session at 2:30 this afternoon. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.